Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This reports for the 13th. Well, we had a virtual zero range day the other day. I mean, just kind of continued along with what we're seeing with this continuation of magenta over yellow. We got cyan under red, so all those things being equal, we're still moving along. Also the blue over green, so strong continuation trend. And actually, look at with the white well below the 10 level. So fairly strong, positive setup. Likewise from the NQ, almost same readings except for we ended up with cyan moving ahead. So a little bit softer from that standpoint. At least there's more short activity from the NQ standpoint. Gold starting to roll over. You see we got the crosses of magenta below, and it's been in a soft stretch here where the blue has remained under green the entire range of it, so that's a factor for softness. Doesn't mean that you still can't have continuation sideways from it. From a euro standpoint, just back and forth range again. There was a huge spread here of the magenta over, so it takes a while for that to work itself. Now they're getting close again, so could get a little bit broader reading here. If we get a magenta cross below and then green pivot lower, you might be able to see something break down a little bit more. Then we've already seen the rejection of the cyan to green on the DOC, and you're coming from pretty deep shakeout there, and it's still positive. But if this starts to move negative, we would get a retrace back into it. So 5K kind of shows it. I mean, it was like zero range, relatively speaking. I mean, there's still some decent moves. We had that slight short that began from the end of the day before. And then we came across kind of flat, and we ended up with our pivots. Actually, secondary higher pivot here on the blue, and then the magenta got over the yellow, and that gave us our NBI setup there that continued up nicely until a little bit of a breakdown, and that started literally right before, and it was just a matter of waiting for that blue to cross under for a complete confirmation within that setup. But it didn't take long for that to reverse, and it's just because, as I was talking about, the up pivots that start early on. We had a move down to the 178. It wasn't quite negative, but once it started to build, it's just a tiny range. I mean, that was the problem with it, and it just kept going back and forth like that. What I was showing, though, was this little red consideration here where you end up with the magenta going below green, and everything trailing lower without up pivots of the green. But as soon as you get that below 10 level and then the blue turnaround, and that immediately corrects back to the upside in this case. Then we had this one where we were talking about the exact same situation where here the magenta, what I think was interesting about it is, well, yes, it points out that short. What you're looking for is a continuation of magenta and yellow continuing to cascade lower. Something that looks more like this on the left side where it just continues to go straight down, but it didn't, which becomes valuable because after that signal, it crossed back around, and then boom, you get blue, and once you know you get your blue over green, usually you get a stronger momentum to the upside, and getting out of the short there was not a problem, relatively speaking, because you still ended up with lows that took you below the entry level, and then from there, blue above the green was clean until you get the crossover. And this is one of those where it becomes a preference on trade management. You know, when you're seeing that pivot lower of blue and the cross of the magenta, you know, whether you want to exit something like that early from a long side and see if it develops into anything, it's always going to be one of those buyback above constructs. Just from our color standpoint, it's a little more conservative. And then as we moved across, that was a decent decline that came through, and then again ended up with the turnaround pivot, pretty clean from that standpoint, and then green over cyan on the dip of orange, and that led to a nice burst that came through. And then we've just kind of been sideways back and forth We ended up with this little bit of dip there, but as soon as that pivoted up, it was right back up to the peaks again. So just continuing to make those adjustments, and overall, fairly happy with how that's looking. It is interesting because if you go to and I mentioned this before, there will be an adjustment for the higher time frames, like 60-minute and even one for 50K, and then it's separate for the ES, simply because when you're looking at the higher time frames, when you have that magenta over yellow and the pivot, and then an up pivot of either the blue and the green, that's going to be an earlier signal, simply because of the broader time frame. This move of the magenta over the yellow is equivalent on a 5K chart to the green and blue movement. So it will be slightly different, and that's fine. And that's simply because you want to react a little sooner to those moves, because they'll have a little bit more standing of range overall. So it's just worth pointing that out, and why there would be that subtle difference, simply because of how much it takes in a bar range in order to make a move. In that case, it's not necessarily the time as much as seeing the activity take place. So, all in all, good stuff. Again, I will keep posting on the Skype chat as I develop things, working now with the ATRs to create stops that are point-based, so that there'll be inputs, which will make it effectively trade adjustable, so that the pink can actually adjust to various stops that can be inputted on your own, which I think will be a nice feature. As always, though, trade well. We'll talk again later. See you on the Skype chat.